Alabama, Texas in Tuscaloosa. Alabama taking care of business their opening game, which they should have. Texas taking care of business at home against Rice. A lot of build-up for this one. Logos involved, tradition, blue bloods, all of that. Kennington Smith III joins us. TheAthletic.com covers Alabama. Can you feel any different kind of a build-up for this one? I know, Kennington, you just started covering Alabama, but is this a different week in your opinion?
Yeah, it definitely is a different week, and I think it's due to kind of where both programs are at right now. I think both programs are coming into this game feeling like they have something to prove, right? Alabama is the standard bearer of college football and have been, but there are questions about if programs like Georgia have usurped them, and this is an opportunity for them to plant their flag early in the season and establish that they are still Alabama championship contenders. And then for Texas, coming into the SEC next year and what they're projected to do in the Big 12 this year and where they're ranked, Steve Sarkisian in that program needs a signature win to validate the hype. So those two things colliding make for, a monster matchup, and in my opinion, the biggest non-conference game of the year in college football. So you can feel the excitement in the air, and, the players are going to tell you that it's every other game, but fortunately, I'm not a player, so I can tell the truth and say that it's not just another game, and I'm just really excited for this weekend.
Yeah, especially with Texas coming to the conference next year. Like, this has so many different tentacles that could go into it. Jalen Milroe showed a lot last week, and look, they were playing Middle Tennessee State. I know it's not Texas, but how long did that quarterback battle really last, and how long was it his job anyways?
Yeah, I think to answer the first question, I think it persisted into the last week of fall camp. And, when you listen to Nick Saban talk, you kind of have to read between the tea leaves of what he was saying. And throughout fall camp, he was saying, we need someone to take it by the horns. We need someone to take it by the horns. And after the second scrimmage, he goes to the podium and says, we feel like this competition is taking shape to some degree, which, might be a minor change in diction, but it does signify that they had either identified a number one or they had a plan in place. And that plan was to start with Milroe, who had been holding that kind of pole position since last season when he was the number 2 quarterback and went into winter with having a little bit more experience than Ty Simpson. And they compete during spring. They bring in Tyler Buckner from Notre Dame, but none of those things were ultimately the driving force for passing up Jalen Milroe on the depth chart. He just continued to kind of hold that number 1 position. So, they go into the first game with Jalen Milroe, and the expectation was that he could play well enough that they could evaluate all quarterbacks in the game, which is exactly what happened. But Jalen Milroe, I think, exceeded a lot of expectations, and I think he showed a lot of the growth that Nick Saban and Tommy Rees were talking about. And, the key for him is to have a standout performance against Texas, because the competition is technically not over yet, because 5 touchdowns against Middle Tennessee State does build momentum, but turning the ball over against Texas would halt that momentum. So, another strong performance on Saturday will probably crystallize these things, but that's how we got to this point.
Obviously, Kennington, he's not showing, and they're not showing the full package for Middle Tennessee State, as you point out. But what did you see in his actual performance? They obviously are protecting him to some extent to get into this Week 2 matchup. But what did you see good, and maybe what did you not see that you still have a question mark about heading into this game?
Yeah, well, the good things that I saw were a game plan that were fit to fit his strengths. You saw Tommy Rees implement a lot of timing routes, a lot of short passes, intermediate passes to get Jalen Milroe into the flow of the game. I believe he started around 7 for 7, 8 for 8 in the 60-yard range. So he wasn't throwing for long yardage, but he was getting comfortable in the flow of the offense. And Alabama was able to stay ahead of the chain. They did not have a negative play on first down while Jalen Milroe was in the game. So they were staying on script. They were staying ahead of schedule, and those things were kind of elevating his play. And then once he got comfortable, you saw the downfield shots and you saw the deep ball accuracy. So I think surprised a lot of people. So I really liked the game plan. I liked how he was comfortable in the pocket. He wasn't, tucking the ball and running after his first read wasn't there like you saw against the Texas A&M game. And then obviously no turnovers was probably the biggest thing. What I think that he can improve on is processing things pre-snap. There was an instance where Middle Tennessee State showed blitz and Milroe didn't check out of it, and he, they do a halfback toss into the blitz, it results in a negative play. So those type of things he just has to continue to develop in. And Texas, I'm sure, is going to try to throw some exotic things at him to try to confuse him and force mistakes. So that's one thing. And then I just want to see how he operates under pressure. Like you said, the offensive line did hold up well, but there were a few times where Middle Tennessee State sent a blitz and he was sacked as a result of running back pass protection. So even past the offensive line, it's going to take an all offensive effort to kind of, play well to prop him up. And then it's going to be on him to make the necessary plays. This
game notwithstanding, would it surprise you if this year is a bit of a reset for Alabama in total? And look, a Nick Saban reset is not like a Boston College reset or a Stanford or Cal or someone like that, Iowa State, wherever you want to say. A Nick Saban reset might mean 9-3 is more possible than it normally would be.
Yeah, I think it's more possible, but I don't know that I can see it getting to that point. I think, in my opinion, at most, you would see 2 Alabama losses. This is one of them one of the games, because Alabama is still early in the season and there are still question marks at a few positions, and they might be more susceptible than later on in the year when they truly have their identity. So this is one of those possible losses. I do think that element does exist where you see Alabama maybe take a step back in the first year of, like a Jalen Milroe starting or whoever might end up being the quarterback, and a young wide receiver core and a true freshman at left tackle and a true freshman at safety. So, you can kind of see the skeleton of a potential step back year, but you also see elements of a team that could compete for a championship. So, there probably is more variation in what Alabama could be this year than past years, but I still feel like, the floor for this team is kind of a 2-loss New Year's Six bowl level team.
What are your thoughts? And I know Kennington, we're not covering him at the time, but I'm sure we're able to enjoy the game. Texas and Alabama a year ago, when Alabama, Bryce Young had the huge scramble, they kick a field goal, and they were in trouble for most of that game. Your thoughts about how much that game, if at all, affects what we may see on Saturday?
Yeah, I think there are some elements from that game that you look at least from the Texas side, that say they have to do those things in order to be viable in this game. And one of them, and the most obvious one, is probably Quinn Ewers getting off to a hot start. What probably is the biggest takeaway from that game is a question mark, and that question mark is what would have been had Quinn Ewers not gotten hurt, because he played such a great first quarter, and Texas was kind of rolling and had them on their heels, to your point. So can Quinn Ewers have that same type of momentum in Bryant-Denny, which I think is another thing that I'm going to be looking at in this game, is Texas going to Alabama and playing in this hostile atmosphere. Are they going to be able to get some momentum early in this game? So those are going to be the things that I'm going to be looking for. I think penalties was a huge part of, Alabama's struggles against Texas last year. Alabama only had, I believe, 1 or 2 penalties, throughout the entire game against Middle Tennessee State. 0 on the offensive side, which is a good thing for Milroe's chances. Is Alabama going to play a little bit more disciplined? So those will probably be the 3 things that I'm looking at the most as, what you could take from last year and apply it to this game.
Kennington, enjoy it. I know you will. Kennington Smith III, theathletic.com, covering Alabama. The game Saturday in Tuscaloosa. We'll hear from Roger Wallace, who we had on earlier this year, about Texas as they play that game on the road against Alabama.
You know what's weird about Bryant-Denny State?